Hello and welcome to FinTech Talk. I'm your host, Charles Orton-Jones. Today we're looking at real-time payments and ensuring your legacy infrastructure can keep up. Real-time payments is a red-hot subject right now. There was a survey earlier this year suggesting that 90% of organizations in the United States are planning to upgrade their payments infrastructure to cope with faster payments. It's the same story across the EU, in the UK, in the Middle East, in Africa. So what can organizations do to upgrade their legacy infrastructure? Well, the formula here at FinTech Talk is to introduce you to the world's leading experts on any given subject, and that's what we're going to do today. We have a FinTech regular, Dr. Ritesh Jain. Ritesh, if you turn your camera on, Ritesh is an entrepreneur, investor, FinTech expert. He's a board advisor at OtherPay. He's been at the World Bank as an advisor. He's a former COO of HSBC. He's been at Visa. His CV goes on and on. Ritesh, great to have you
Hi,
with us.
Charles. Pleasure to be here and good to see you again.
So good. And we have Jimena Santillan. She is a fintech expert with a stellar CV. Jimena was head of digital and mobile at CaixaBank, if I'm pronouncing that correctly with my Catalan accent. And she's currently product director with a tier one bank who, for legal reasons we won't mention, but you definitely have heard of them. Jimena, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Charles. Thanks, Ritesh.
And we're
Pleasure
hoping just to
meeting you,
kick off
Jimena.
this discussion, a news item this week, which just sums up how fast moving the world of real-time payments is. A bank in the Middle East, a QNB, has moved its US dollar corporate payment operations to a blockchain-based platform operated by JP Morgan Chase. And I mean, Jimena, just sum up just how complicated and fast-moving the payments world is. The blockchain solution, not to every bank's taste. But yeah, just tell us just how interesting right now is the real-time payments world.
I think that we see more and more traditional banks moving to the blockchain since blockchain brings a lot of benefits. Most for these traditional banks, also we saw yesterday in the news, Swift is joining with 30 traditional banks as well, a long list of them joining the blockchain, sorry, and definitely is bringing what they need, the real-time payments, cross-border, not only for domestic, the blockchain brings that in real time, also settlement, all this transparency. And let's be honest, most of those banks, they have these legacy systems which they don't allow to have those real time and also all the checks, not talking about risk and fraud prevention. So definitely blockchain is bringing a lot of benefits, and that's why we see more and more that.
Ritesh, are you a fan? Are you experienced with the world of blockchain? I know there are definitely some cynics out there in the world of fintech.
It's great in terms of the news which is coming out, and this is nothing new. That's what I would say. That we have been expecting this to come out at some point of time sooner rather than later. We have seen that. If I recall my experience with HSBC while I was at the bank, we have built up a blockchain-based platform for the lending, and I'm sure in this very place, Charles, we have mentioned that example in the past. So what Swift is doing today, or even JP Morgan have been on the blockchain and using their own chains earlier. That's pretty much set in the stone. So yes, very much we are looking forward for the payments to move to the blockchain. Now the question comes down whether what sort of payments, right? Whether it's a domestic, cross-border settlements, what we are looking at, as well as where it makes sense, and whether are we really ready for this. So
Are we
yeah,
ready for this? Yeah.
it's a Pandora box which opens up. Because proving a technology is one part, but at the same time, the readiness of the financial institution, that's a challenging part as well at the same.
Well, let's just talk about where we are then. I mean, Ritesh, I'm going to put you on the spot here. Just try and sum up the readiness of, it's an extremely difficult question, of the banking fintech industry when it comes to real-time payments, because some people will be thinking, well, the European Union has its mandate that all transactions be settled, I think within 10 seconds is the rule. Why is any organization having trouble with this stuff? Ritesh, why is it so complicated to master real-time payments?
See, in terms of the real-time payments, let me give you a bit of background. Charles, coming back from the UPI, PIX in Brazil, Fed now in US, and P27 Nordics, which has not seen the light of the day, right? So we'll not talk about the P27, but we'll talk about the other projects as well as what happened. So when we talk about the real-time payments, I'll not talk about the opportunity or the efficiency. I'll rather talk about the friction. Right. Let's be realistic. The banks have been built over the centuries, right? And they have been built and patched over the period of time to be in a place where they are today. Now, to have a real-time payment capability, there's a quite a lot of capability which is required, which have been done by fintechs over the period of time, or the digital public infrastructure in the different economies. I will not say I will not name it, but let's be realistic. When people in Bangalore can pay on the UPI and getting settled immediately, why that can't happen in the other economies like the UK European market or the different markets for the retail customers? So that's where the challenge is. Now, when it comes down to the real-time payments, there's a significant amount of onus onto the financial institution and the networks as well. Right? It comes with a lot of challenges with the fraud, your interoperability. It comes with a lot of liquidity, because as for the real-time settlement, you need to have the liquidity pool build up as well. So that's another challenge. So there are multifaceted challenge, and the fraud is one of the major challenges that I see, because I have always said the frictionless is great, but definitely you need a friction to reduce the fraud. And that's what one of the challenges that I see common across the industry, which we have not dealt with very efficiently so far.
So fraud is, yeah, that's such an interesting part of this discussion. Jimena, just tell us about how difficult it is to do fraud with real-time payments when transactions are going through in seconds, and banks and fintechs don't have, say, 3 days to scrutinize each transaction.
Yeah, but I think if I were back 2, 3 years ago before COVID, let's say, we have evolved a lot. What I mean is that COVID pushed all the banks, traditional banks, to also to join forces with fintechs in order to have this real-time data, because definitely to have a good risk score for each transaction and fraud prevention in place, you need this real-time data. But I think a lot of things has been done. Also, open banking definitely helped for that. And I see also more collaboration between banks within the European Union in order to battle the fraud. But definitely you need, I mean, I remember in CaixaBank as well, my experience in Spain, the mobile app was very trendy in that moment, and then consumers could even check the transactions in real time, but it was very challenging. Why? Because the legacy system was a big blocker, and that is when you need to do this transaction, and this also, then you need to invest in a new infrastructure that helps you. Otherwise, you start creating these middleware systems where it requires a lot of data, a lot of effort that is not bringing this efficiency. So, but definitely, I believe that we have evolved a lot in terms of fraud and risk. Yeah.
Jimena, just tell us about what is the problem with legacy infrastructure. I mean, is it the outdated cores? Because we see some banks running on weird cores made in the,
Yes.
I don't know, 90s, 80s
Yes.
even,
Yes. Yeah.
which are horrible to work with. I mean, does it go all the way down to the core level?
Definitely when you have very old systems, it doesn't help you with the new technologies that you have in place. So let's say if you want to integrate, for example, FitSay, that is a very good technology, and for this data readiness I was telling you about, in order to create this fraud prevention, you need to have a system infrastructure and all that is in all this ecosystem that is very much agile. So if you are putting something like let's say blockchain in a system from the 80s, then it's going to be a crash, so that's what many banks are going through. And that's why sounding digital transformation, there are a lot as well going on, in the news and so on, but it's very much needed. It sounds like a very cheek to say, digital transformation, but definitely it's a must.
Very much so. Ritesh, I mean, you've worked, HSBC, which I think runs something like 50 cores, 7,000 applications. Does this go all the way down? Is that about right, by the way, if I got that right?
Yeah, let me not comment on that, buddy. But yes, yes, the core is the challenge. But let's be realistic that these systems have not been designed over the period of time for the continuous settlement, continuous or the irrevocability, right? And they have not been designed for the 24/7 fraud detection or the multi of the millisecond fraud detection or the real-time fraud detection capability. That's what is required by the real-time payments today. So in the payments capability, the networks have been built up, the rails have been built up, and which enables anybody for the real-time payment capability. But ultimately, when it comes down to the financial institutions, they are not equipped, and they were not equipped. They are getting equipped now. So don't get me wrong, they are getting equipped, and some of them are way forward. Now the challenge is, when you ask me, where's the challenge? So let's get down to the messaging level, right? So, but 2022, I'm sure you all have heard. There's a lot of conversation around the messaging protocol onto the payments. There was a lot of transformation happening across the global markets. I have set up in some of the regions as well for the large consulting companies. But even some of the financial institutions, they have not upgraded it, right? Though it's mandatory now. So they were still running on MT. So MT to 2022. So that's a significant transformation. That's a messaging. So when you say about the core, yes, it gets down to the T. It gets down to that label. But let me come back to you on when Jimena mentioned about the fraud, and I say about the fraud, yes, the fraud is not ready yet. But let me tell you, what we are in 2025. It was 2009. We have implemented the real-time scoring platform at Visa in 2009, and we did not call it AI. But every transaction was getting scored in real time as soon as you punch the numbers of your pen. And that's what we were doing then. So yes, we have come a long way, and there's a significant transformation and the collaboration.
Yeah. So, but you're quite conservative, though. I sense that Jimena would much prefer to work with some modern cloud native core. But Ritesh, it sounds like you're not quite as dramatic. You're quite happy for banks to continue with their existing cores. You think they can
No,
work with their legacy systems?
not really, Charles. I have implemented a significant amount of uh, forward-looking cloud-based, SaaS-based core banking platforms in the
Mm,
financial institutions, some of the largest financial institutions in the world. So what I'm saying, let's give them a benefit of doubt. See, if you consider the financial institutions, their budget is, if you talk about a top 10 financial institution, I can talk
mm,
about the one which I work with, and I dealt with a significant amount of budget. We are spending around a 6 to 10 or $12 billion a year in the technology, right?
yeah.
So it's not about the money. It's about when you are transforming a bank, it takes a significant amount of effort and the risk associated with. Effort is absolutely fine. It's a number of people we can throw in, right? That's not a challenge. It's all about bit by bit by bit, piece by piece. That's what happens. You can't just rip off and transform. So it's a service by service, and that's what's happening in the largest organizations today. So if you look into their capability, as you rightly said, the 7,000 services and blah and blah and blah, yes, we have done that. So if you
Mm,
talk about how far we are in the largest bank in the world in terms of the cloud transformation, we are far ahead.
yeah.
We are far ahead. So yes, migration is happening. But when you start compare that with the fintech, let's be realistic. These are fintechs are born in last 15 years, right?
Mm,
So you can't really compare a century-old organization with a 15-year because you were born in agility. So yes, that's a difference. But with the right partnerships, the right collaborations, financial institutions are getting there. So yes, I'm not conservative about let's run it on the core and the legacy core. What I'm talking about, let's be realistic, right? If you think about any CIO or the CEOs of the financial institution can whip off the bank and change it and transform it in a year's time, no, that's not going to happen. That's a wrong
Oh,
expectation.
well, Jimena, what's your take on this? Because in the UK, we have seen banks, Lloyds Bank moving over to Thought Machine's new core. TSBC had a horrible experience trying to update their core, went offline, and I'm not sure they've ever recovered. Sorry, TSB. Jimena, what's your take? I mean, what Ritesh makes a really compelling case for major organizations, tier one banks, doing it bit by bit. What's your view?
No, definitely I agree with Ritesh. I mean, it requires a lot of time and it's not only about budget. And again, it's unfair to compare a traditional bank versus a fintech, mostly because the regulations and all the legal environment is not the same. Doesn't apply the same for a fintech than for a bank. First, let's say about that, but I I believe that this digital transformation has been happening. And I saw it also in Santander, for example, but most of the banks that start doing this with like, let's call it open bank, for example, within
Mm,
Santander, is the digital bank or in Caixa, So a lot of those traditional banks are creating like another enterprise, let's say, that is that's bringing this digital transformation. But still the core system is the same. So it's what is happening as well when you see these big banks doing collaboration with fintechs. At the end, you are cutting this innovation from the fintechs because you are bringing it back or forward to your old system. Again, that can take time. It requires a lot of time, resources, and so on. But I think it's possible. Again, we have seen it already, a big evolution in terms not only on payments, real-time payments, but as well in terms of technical and yes, digital information.
Great. Ritesh, you have a remarkable perspective because you're so international in your outlook. I wonder if you could just help some of our viewers understand, what great technologies exist internationally. Do you see things maybe in India or the Middle East or even stuff in the UK that our global viewers could learn from? Which
Great.
countries, which organizations do you think are the ones you look to for innovation?
See, I spent quite a lot of time in India, UK, Europe, US, Middle East, now and Southeast Asia. So basically cover almost everything. Now let me tell you, I would definitely welcome you all to GFF, which is the Global FinTech Fest happening from 7th to 9th in Mumbai, and which is the largest FinTech fest as of now. It's 100,000 people walking in, and you'll see all the technologies available in the world, right? And we are going to have a great time over there because the friends from all over the world are joining. In terms of the technology, see, it's not about just the technology. Let me tell you, the banks have always been, and now more so, getting on the back of the technology. Oh, it's a latest technology, get back onto that. I'm sure Jimena would appreciate and understand. Kexa Bank, at one point of time, they started even the VR capability for their customers, right? We have supported them to build up the VR capability, but let me tell you, do your customer really need the VR capability for the banking? No, they don't, right? So sometimes it's not just about the technology, it's basically the adoption and what your customer needed. So today, the expectation, I'm bringing it back to the real-time payment, that is a customer expectation and the requirement. And your businesses needed more than that because businesses don't want to, especially the exporters, they don't want to get settled within a week. They want to get settled within 24 hours or even earlier, right? If we can do that instantly, nothing like it. But I would say within 24 hours, and we have got some capability building over there. So in terms of the technology, core banking has transformed. Now we are talking about the AI as an infrastructure, not an overthought or afterthought. So AI as part of the infrastructure, core banking transformation, payment capability on top of that, as well as the banking as a service platforms are supporting even the financial institutions, though it is a banking as a service, but they are very much supporting the core financial institution with their capabilities. Oh, a lot of fintechs, they have built up the fintech as a service sort of capability, where if banks want to spin off any other product or services, they don't have to build and wait for months or years to get the product out. They can do it in Ziffy, right? If we talk about the core banking platform today, if you want to roll out a new product, especially related to the card or the accounts, you can do that within a 7 to 15 days tops. And why I'm saying 7 to 15 days, basically from the rollout perspective, otherwise you can literally build a product within a day or 3 days. So that's what the capabilities the core banking platforms are providing today.
So tremendous speed of innovation. Jimena, Ritesh just touched on customer expectations. What are they? Do people now just routinely expect real-time payments? What's your view?
People want really fast responses. If I have an issue, I want a fast response. I don't want to speak on the telephone with nobody. I want that my mobile app is giving me the solution. And again, real time. Everything's about real time. We want something fast, like a TikTok video. If I need to do something, I need it. It's true, this new generation as well, the new generation are the main customers of those banks. So definitely, I think that, for example, what I was telling you, mobile apps. If I want to do something, I want to see the transaction that I made. I want a nice analytics where I want to see how much I'm spending, I don't know, in restaurant, and where I need to save, how much money I can save, all of these. And also we're seeing in cross-border payments, why in Africa or Latin America, these stable coins are growing up so much because people cannot, they cannot use the typical traditional banks, or let's say for Western Union or whatever is the company. So they are using stable coins. So I believe people want fast, and obviously, if we're talking about blockchain, we're talking also about lower fees. Definitely, that's a must. So I want some cheap.
Well, let me touch on fees. I must confess, I recently need to do my tax return in the UK. I'm a customer of Wise, formerly TransferWise. I needed to click to download my tax statement. This will be ready in 10 days, it said. What little glitch they've got on the back end. Otherwise, Wise is a wonderful company, and I applaud it in many regards, but it just shows how difficult it is to get all this stuff right.
I'll definitely convey the private equity investor about the feedback from you, Charles. But let me tell you on the flip side, right? I'm in Mumbai today, right? And my family member has submitted a tax return on the government site
Mm.
at around 11 o'clock in the night, right? And got up at 2:15 in the early morning by a message from the tax department of a refund. Right?
Gosh.
So I'm not talking about a private institution or a fintech. I'm talking about the government. So when you ask me that what is really happening across the world, the way forward that I see is the digital public infrastructure in the economies, the ways which are owned and governed by the institutions, right? And that's what the future, to be honest. So think about the tax return with a refund coming back in less than 4 hours. An economy like India, what else you expect?
I think that's it. People never want to go back, do they? The moment you've experienced a superior service, going back is tremendously difficult. Jimena, you just touched on fees. Everything has a cost to it, and you're right. If people are being charged for particularly international transactions and being hit with a fee, and I say this as someone who uses PayPal for a side hustle, and they like to whack me for 5% of everything I generate one way or another.
Yeah.
How sensitive are people to fees when it comes to stuff like payment transactions?
Sadly, people got used to that they need to pay a high fee, but that's why there are more options coming. As I just mentioned, that's why stablecoins are getting more and more popular. No, let's call it PIX in Brazil, UPI in India, and also M-Pesa in Africa. I think people are looking for another options. And definitely, obviously, if we go for target, you have the target of people who is not bankized at all. So people who doesn't have access to a regular bank account, definitely need to look for more options. And I think that's, again, what blockchain stablecoin is bringing to this target of people. But yeah, in terms of fees, that's definitely an enhancement of the also in terms of user the UX, that also the journeys are more friendly, and that you don't need to go to a branch in order to to justify and why you need to do such a transaction and so on. So it's something that you can just download the app, do it, and that's it. So yeah.
Yeah, perhaps you just kind of alluded to something I think is interesting, that people now have access to multiple services, multiple payment things. I mean, I have umpteen bank accounts. I have Wise, I have Monzo, I have NatWest that I must have opened when I was 10 years old. I have Lloyd's Bank for Business. I have PayPal. I use whatever's most efficient. Do you think that's just a growing trend now, something that's a new reality, that people now
Yeah,
use multiple financial organizations and just shift their
definitely.
transactions to
Definitely.
whichever one is most competent?
That's why also we're talking about payment orchestration as well. I think that people should get the option to choose which is the company that they want to use for, dependent of the occasion. I don't know. For example, if I want to go to pay my coffee at the Starbucks, I can use my stable coins. Or if I want to do a bigger purchase at Amazon, I can use my Visa card from a bank. So definitely there are a lot of options. People sometimes can get a little bit of DC, in terms of how many
Yeah.
options I have, which one should I use or not. And maybe we can put in the play the buy now, pay later, no? That is like a stop last year a little bit in terms of friction and regulations and so on. But now I see that it's increasing. And again, this new generation as well is using a lot. I don't know if it's good or bad. There's another discussion.
Well,
So risk and
it,
debt management, but definitely it's another option.
it certainly makes it tough to work in this industry. I mean, Ritesh, just, I've use the word dizzying. I mean, if you work in the banking industry, is there a danger that there are just too many technologies out there, too many rival payment systems, and it just becomes hard to keep up? I mean, not only within any one country, but just if you look at the European landscape, all the territories you cover. I mean, this is a phenomenally complicated landscape, isn't it?
It is, and some reasons are more than the others, to be honest. But let's be realistic. Real-time payments and the small change payments, especially the capabilities like the digital public infrastructure, I would say specifically like the UPI or the PIX have changed the perception of the payments, right? So whether the guy who is on the side of the street selling something or the street vendor or anybody else, right, they can accept any sort of payments very quickly. So it made their life easier. Now, what has happened over the period of time that yes, there are multiple options for the payment, and that's where the payment orchestration, and that's where you must have seen quite a lot of wallet capability. We have seen Curve, which have built up over the period of time, which has been sold to Lloyds recently, right? So there are a lot of things which are happening, and this is just a Pandora box. It is, see, generally what happens, like in technology, I'll make it overly simple, right? We go for the consolidation, then the divergence, then the consolidation, and that's what the cycle, that's what we see all over the time. So we have gone ahead with the core banking platform and then the services based capability, then consolidating that into the core banking capability, then coming into the banking as a service, right? And similarly into the payments, yes, it is dizzying for the people, but let me tell you, the biggest challenge comes down to the people who are not financially literate. So I wear my hat of GPFI as an advisor in the World Bank, the Global Partnership for Financial Inclusion. Yes, it is very difficult for people to keep up with the kind of payments that they can make, and not having enough and the right information push them behind in the queue. If we talk about that, it happens only in the certain economies. No, let me give you an example again on the same forum which we have discussed at some point of time over here. In UK, while we have been building Infinite, we did a significant survey with 250,000 people from across the country. What do you think about 79% people who make the minimum payment on their credit card? They are not aware that they are charged higher interest rates, and these are the people who are into the jobs, who are even from the financial institutions, right? So that's the level of the financial literacy, right? So what we really need to do, we need to educate our customer as well, that these are the payment options, this is how they are segregated, and that's what you need to make a choice. Because we, when I say we as a financial institution, as well as the other society, which are has got the responsibility of the financial literacy as well while we are making up these products and services.
Gosh, it feels like an uphill battle. What do you think, Jimena? I mean, educating people about financial literacy,
Definitely it's a must.
hellishly difficult, isn't it? I mean, even beyond the main payment methods, the ordinary consumer gets pretty dizzy pretty fast.
Yeah. But definitely educating people is a must, Charles. I fully agree with Ritesh. I mean, and you see in the regions that I mentioned before, you see more and more people, they don't understand how banks work or how a payment works, So there are a lot of things, not talking about investment. Definitely it's not something out of their scope. So that's why there are many apps as well. Many companies are coming like, let's be again the TikTok of investment, because it's teaching, and I think there is a lack of knowledge on how to manage as well. As I say, it's very easy to have too many options, but once you understand what you need and when you need it, that is a must for the consumer. The consumer is winning. So yeah.
I just wanted to ask you if anyone watching has a question, you're able to type your message in and I'll pose it. I just wanted to touch on almost a personal interest on the ability to recruit the right people, because we're going through a tech boom at the moment. Every company, mining companies, need an AI strategy. How hard it is to get hold of the right people. And I know that banks can struggle if they're working in, I don't know, legacy tech. They're working in languages that computer science graduates are not familiar with. Jimena, how difficult is it to find the right people?
It's difficult, but at least in my case, what I've seen or what I have seen, I mean, we're talking now about AI, but AI and machine learning is being done since years and years back, so before COVID. But I think what companies are doing, they go for external talent, to look for talent outside. Or what I'm seeing more and more often is to educate or to train internal people, but not only like, I don't know, go to Harvard University and do a course or program about AI, no, hands-on, in the matter, learning and test and try and test and error, and I think is a good way. And you see a lot of banks using a lot now. As I mentioned, AI is very trendy, but it's something that we have been doing. I mean, since the mobiles app are existing, machine learning was there. How you could do like a commercial action if somebody just bought, I don't know, a mattress at IKEA, so you can offer a credit card in order to pay the transaction, or to do it and pay in installments later on. So this is something that we have been using data. And but yes, in terms of knowledge, I think that people is educating themselves, and I think with all the access that we have nowadays is easier. So
Okay. Now we've just got a couple of minutes left. Let's just return to the core of our theme, which is how to upgrade legacy infrastructure to cope with real-time payments. Ritesh, just give us your concise advice for people watching this who work in an organization, maybe with a pretty difficult back end.
So
What's your practical advice when you go into organizations?
pretty much simple, right? The legacy infrastructure have not been built for the real-time payments, right? So you can't expect that. So basically, you need to start thinking about the multiple tenets into it. Whether it's you look into the KYC, eKYC, fraud and risk management, you look after the liquidity and the settlement. The liquidity pressure is significantly higher when you're in the real-time payments capability. You have got a pre-funding requirements onto the account, so that sort of capability. And apart from that, you are significantly into the compliance checklist that goes up multifold. So your regulatory and the compliances need to be really rigor up when you think about the real-time payment capability, the payment transaction messages. So the messaging capability has to increase in terms of, like you're on the modern messaging transfer, or you should have been transformed on the modern messaging as of now. If you're looking into the real-time payment, adopting the real-time payment capability. But so is it only the real-time payments, or we are talking about the whole core banking gamut?
Okay. By the way, we just have got a question from Danny Martin, who's
Mhm.
interested in maybe this was a Ryder Cup influence question, but this is Europe versus the USA. Is Europe
Oh,
leading
come
the
on.
payment revolution, or is the USA still
Buddy,
catching up? And my instinct's the USA surely still catching up. Jimena, do you have any awareness of this, USA versus Europe?
yes, I mean, there are a lot of companies from the USA doing a lot of things, but also in Europe. But I think the ones that the most noisy, let's say, are USA, like Stripe, for example. But I think definitely, Danny, that Europe is still leading the payment revolution, and there are a lot of things that are being done and put in place. So we cannot complain what has been done.
okay, guys. Now I get a bit touchy. Okay, so let's you guys are talking about the Europe and the US catching
Yeah.
up with the payments. Yes, because the other regions are far ahead. India is leading the payments in the world. Come on. And then the Brazil, Pix is doing phenomenal job. Literally, it's far better than UPI in terms of the adoption. So yes, if you're talking about, see, there's a huge difference, and I've always been asked this question. I have replied that a few times, and even on the social and the articles, that why UK do not have a QR payments versus the other emerging economies has the QR payments, right? So it's all about the payment infrastructure which have been built up and adaptable, right? And over here, I recall when I was leading Apple Pay, I made a
Mhm.
statement at that point of time because we were, 2010, we used to do 60 million transactions a day in Visa Europe.
Mm.
60 million transactions, really, that's nothing today, right? It has grown exponentially. So in terms of, I will not quote in terms of the number of transactions for a reason, but in terms of the payment capability, India is leading the world. Brazil is making its move. Europe have been stable. Let me tell you, Europe, I love in terms of the payment infrastructure capability in the UK and Europe, where it is pretty much stable. Fed now tried to copy UPI, nowhere close, right? In US, it's a different challenge in terms of the payment. It's not about the infrastructure. They can build the infrastructure, but it's a regional issues in the US and fragmented issues that's causing themselves a lot more challenge. Let's pick an example of open banking for that matter, right? Why open banking is not adopted in US as the way it has done in UK, Europe, or other part of the world.
Because JP
Simple.
Morgan wants to make money with it. And fintechs are not happy with that.
Okay, so I think it takes us to the end of our session. Ritesh, I think that's such a beautiful theme, but it comes up again and again on FinTech Talk is, when Brits or
Thank you.
Europeans start deluding themselves that they're leading the world. someone pipes up and says, you are aware that Brazil does this, or Singapore is already years ahead of this. So it's a message, please, everyone, take a chance to look what's
Charles,
happening in the rest of the world, because innovation is absolutely not confined to those two countries, the two continents, Europe and the US. Jimena, thank you so much for your expertise and perspective. That's hugely appreciated. And Ritesh, thank you once again.
thank you, Charles. Thank you, Manna. Pleasure meeting you.
Thank you,
And
Ritesh.
from
Same
myself and
here.
everyone in the production team of FinTech Talk, thank you for joining us.